Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Galle versus Carreno fight. And so, if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So, going into this fight, Galle is 10-0-1 with 1 KO, and Carreno is 25-4 with 20 KOs. This fight is for the IBO or World Bantamweight title. Galle's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Flores, and Carreno's last fight was a win via stoppage in round 5 versus Hernandez. This is in Galle's home country of Canada. Galle is 35 and Carreno is 26. Carreno's losses have come versus Galle in 2023, Forzand in 2022, Lopez in 2019, and Ruprecht in 2018. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I said, this is for the IBO world title. It's not one of the major sanctioning bodies, and it's not a huge fight, this one. But to be honest, the first fight was a good performance. I think we have a good name, a good fighter in Galle. I think she's an excellent fighter, and I think she showed that in the first fight versus Carreno. What I'm interested in this fight is to why they're making it. It's a rematch. Galle won via unanimous decision, and I think she won convincingly. I think, I'm going to speak a bit more about what she did well in that fight in just a moment, but in general, I think she won convincingly. Like I say, it's interesting to see why they're trying to make the rematch. Perhaps there is limited opponents available. Perhaps the promoter wasn't able to, speak to many fighters. Maybe a lot of fighters are held up at the moment in the division. I'm not too sure. When you look at possible options, there's a Dina Forzand who's not really fighting outside of Denmark, but Galle probably would have been willing to go to Denmark to fight her. Then, you got Sharessa Metcalf. I suppose she wouldn't have wanted to fight just after fighting Yoshida in her rematch. Same with Shanika Johnson and Hughes. So perhaps, there's a few things that may be slowing down the division a bit. I mean, we don't have something like an Ebony Bridges fighting either. So that's another fighter in which is a big name that's out of the division at the moment. But, in general, like I say, it's just interesting to see that we have this rematch happening. I mean, obviously it's in Gaia's home country again. Gaia has only ever left Canada once, and that was earlier on in her career. So, most of her fights has been there. She seemingly got a bit of a fan base, a bit of support out there in Canada, and in general, I think there is some excellent Canadian events happening at the moment. I mean, in just around the same time, we have Ryan Rizicki fighting in Canada for his world title, or interim world title. We also have Osas Iglesias fighting out of Canada a lot. We have Bealey fighting out of Canada a lot. In general, I think there is, like I mentioned, some great Canadian, well, people representing Canada coming through. Also, Canadian talent as well. Canadian events being put on by multiple different promoters, from what it seems. So they seem to be keen as of recent to really get into boxing and really get involved in boxing. And I think it's nice to see. I think it's a new country kind of getting involved a bit into it, and that's something in which I'm never gonna discourage or anything like that. And something that I did want to talk about, just a random little topic in which I kind of wanted to talk about. Gaia is 35. She's not young as a fighter, but she's not really old at the same time. But quite a lot of women's champions are on the older side, is something in which I've kind of picked up. Most of the heavier weight ones are. There's a few lower weight ones as well. I mean, there's some matchups in which you have Natasha Jonas as well, who's just turned 40. There's another world champion in which Kay Scott, who's fighting for a world title in the middleweight division. She's 40 as well, I believe now as well. So there is seemingly a bit of an age thing. There's a lot of men's fighters who are champions who are also on the older side. I mean, especially in the heavyweight division as well. But in general, that's just something in which I found interesting. I'm not too sure if it's just you know there's less amateur talent yet. Maybe they're still just coming through. Maybe, I'm not too sure. Maybe all the big promoters have kind of picked up the younger fighters, and the other ones are, left, but there's still quite a lot of older ones left. I mean, Nina Hughes as well is, on the older side as well with her title. And, I'm not slating that in any kind of way. It's impressive that you're able to win a title. But, it's just something in which, in general, I said, I just thought was interesting, the average age of a women's world champion. Just, I'd be curious if anybody knew the maths of what that actually would, or what that actually is. Like I say, for me, that's just interesting. Carreno as a fighter, though, she's got loads of knockouts. That's the kind of thing in which she's been able to do and been able to execute, and it's just something which is very surprising. In the women's game, there isn't fighters in which are typically getting loads of knockouts. There are fighters who are hard hitters, powerful punchers. I mean, Claressa Shields is coming off a great knockout in her last fight, but before that, she was on a bit of a run where she wasn't really stopping many fighters. But Carreno has been able to stop a lot of fighters, and the record in which he's racked up. I know they're against lesser opponents. It's a bit of a padded type record, but the record she's been able to rack up has included a lot of stoppages. It is entertaining, and perhaps that's the reason as to why she's gotten this rematch. They've both gone away, both Galle and Carreno. They've gone away, had another fight since the original fight between the two of them, and been able to win. But Carreno is back to stoppage ways. Like I say, perhaps that's just a reason as to why we're making the fight again. Carreno's style is entertaining and will forever be entertaining. She's only ever lost at world title level. She, fought Dina Forsen. Dina Forsen is the current unified world champion in the division, so that's not a bad loss at all. Lopez was a world champion as well. I think she fought for the WO belt when they fought between the two of them, but she's also fought at a high level against multiple different world champions as well. And Ruperich has just gone and became unified world champion in the atomweight division after losing versus Estrada. Since then, she's gone down in weight to the atomweight division, and like I say, has become a unified champion as well. So to only have losses against the person in which she's facing, then two current unified world champions and a former world champion as well, it's not bad losses. So, there's no kind of discredit to her name or anything like that. She's always been willing to go to opponents' homes, which is something in which I'm very interested in, and I give her full props for doing that. She went to Germany for Ruperich, she went to Argentina for Lopez, she went to Denmark for Forsens, she went for Canada for the first Galle fight and for this second one as well. She's always been willing to go to opponents' home countries, and that's just like I say, you got to give her credit for doing that. This fight originally, the first one was on DAZN. It was, surprising to see it on DAZN in the first place, to be honest, because I didn't really know. You didn't really hear too much about it actually being mentioned. But I'm not too sure if this one's on DAZN or not. Hopefully it is, because it's a women's world title fight, and I would like to see it, and it should be put on a big platform. Hopefully it will be. Just what I've mentioned, the first one was, so perhaps this second one might be as well. But to speak about them both individually as fighters, basing a lot of it off the last performance, well, the last fight between the two of them. Galle, she's a controlled boxer with very good fundamentals, and she was able to utilize that very well versus Carreno. Kind of just showed that boxing ability and that high IQ levels that much superior to that of Carreno's, and in general made her performance look excellent from that fight. She picks her shots well. She was able to do so throughout a lot of the fight. She has a high guard. She was typically able to catch a lot of Carreno's shots, but I also think she has a good chin as well to be able to, deal with Carreno's shots, like I say, on the run in which she was on before that, and on the TKO streak in which she does have. To be able to, deal with the shots and to deal with the pressure and, take a few big shots from her, she was able to do that well. She typically will walk you down, but also can fight on the back foot at the same time. She was walking down Carreno during the first few rounds, and then Carreno kind of flipped it and then was walking her down into the later, mid to later few. So, it can work both ways. She can fight on the front foot or the back foot. I also think Carreno can also fight on the front foot or the back foot, which, perhaps is a good thing for somebody with her style. I'll speak a bit more about that in a moment. She's light on her feet, Galle. She resets well, in which is something which was very nice to see. Multiple occasions, she was having them exchanges. She was kind of hitting and moving. She was then resetting very, very well back into the centre of the ring. Her accuracy was well. In general, that discipline was there, like what I was just speaking about, to be able to go into exchanges, just land a few, and then move away was the smart thing to do. It's the disciplined thing to do. I'm sure it's what the game plan was set out there to do. She's a mid-range type fighter. She uses all of the ring, and it seemed like it was quite a big ring in the first time between the two of them, and she was able to utilize that well. She's got good head movement. Carreno definitely does load up on shots, and Galle was able to see them shots coming and be able to move well with her head movement throughout a lot of the time. She, like I say, I think has a good chin in my opinion, and she's got good scoring shots as well to be able to win the judges over. They're not always happen to be the most powerful, but their combinations, like I said, they're clean, kind of shoe shine type combinations in which you can have success and then move along and score points from doing that. Negatives about her, I think finding her range can sometimes be a little bit of an issue. Perhaps it took a couple rounds versus Carreno. I think she was just wary of what Carreno could offer, and I think in general it did take a little bit of time to find range. She also, of course, has the less power and physicality out of the two of them. So Carreno, I think if she comes on with more pressure, she could have more success because, like I say, she's not going to respect Gaia's power. She's faced and tasted Gaia's power now and knows that she won't get rocked or anything from it. So, I think Carreno maybe come out more aggressive for this fight. She's not really got too many big punches either. Sometimes she can get drawn into a bit of a fight and throw some big overhands, but she didn't really do it much versus Carreno, and like I say, was well disciplined. I think her corner saw that she was probably going to start getting drawn into a fight and just told her not to do that. But like I say, she doesn't really offload too many big punches. If in close exchanges, I think she's not going to have a lot of success if she does get caught in close exchanges. She can, be uncomfortable then when she is getting caught in them kind of in close exchanges, and I think her footwork looks poor then, and like I say, she can be seemingly a bit flustered if that happens. Her head movement is good, like I say, but it can drop a little bit if she gets drawn into a fight, and she can kind of duck her head down if she's getting drawn into a fight. But like I say, I don't think that happens too much. She should feint more. I think Carreno will definitely bite onto feints if she's going to feint more, but she just didn't do as much as what perhaps I would have liked her to in that first fight. I also think she didn't capitalise upon Carreno overcommitting a bit, and I would have liked to perhaps see her capitalise upon that a little bit more. And if she stays in range, she will get caught with shots. She didn't stay in range too much in that first fight. It's not really a negative, but if she does stay in range and come into this second fight a bit too overconfident, thinking I've already beaten her once convincingly, I can do the same thing again, she may stay in range a bit too long, and then might be getting caught with shots if she does that. So I wouldn't recommend her do that at all. Carreno as a fighter, she always whips in big, strong hooks, and she is aggressive. And they look powerful. They look like they're going to hurt if they land. And it's a threat in which she has. It's a threat in which not many fighters have, and Carreno has that, and pretty much every single shot in which she throws is kind of whipping in hooks, and if they land, they're probably going to hurt. She changes levels well. I think she will go to the body well. I think Galle goes to the body relatively well. Sometimes not as much as what I'd like her to, but I think Carreno also, like I said, whips in shots to the body nicely as well. She can fight on the front foot or the back foot. I would much prefer her to be a pressure front foot type fighter. I think that would suit into her style much more, but she will be willing to go on to the back foot a bit at times. She can hold opponents, and I think that's what happened in that first fight versus Galle. She was on the back foot for her first few rounds, and then I think she just halted Galle's kind of front foot walking you down type pressure, and then flipped it, and that's something that was impressive that she did. She's got that upper body movement. I think she's got underrated head movement. She was able to have success, with the head movement, the upper body kind of pivoting around her body, and then tried to respond back with shots. They didn't really seem to land, but when she was utilizing her head movement, it did look good. She always tries to respond and is bullish in her movements a lot of the time. She increases pace when she wants to, and typically, can fight at a slow pace at times, but can suddenly then flip the pace and go like at a fast pace and try and take your head off. But I'd like to see that perhaps happen a little bit more. She lets you grow in confidence to be able to then try and halt you and try and shut you down, which is a nice attribute to have. I think. It's an interesting thing to do, and she's got clubbing combinations, and of course she puts her all into her shots. And speaking negatives about her, I think her balance is something that is very poor. I think that got shown up quite a lot. She has that kind of flat-footed walking herself forwards, planting her feet and throwing exchanges. But I think Galle was catching her being clumsy, and you know perhaps she could even get a flash knockdown Galle if Carreno is going to keep doing that. I think she ducks her head down when she's throwing, and that's where Galle looks like a much better boxer because she can see that she's doing that, and she just kind of moves around and doesn't really get too involved. Her punch variation, I think, is limited. Like I say, I think she will come in with the big hooks, but that's kind of realistically all she's going to do. She can overreach. She can be beaten to the punch, and that's something in which Gaia was able to do throughout a lot of the first fight. She can be wide with her overhands again. Another reason that Gaia wasn't kind of getting involved in exchanges. Like I said, not bringing enough pressure. I would like to see her bring more pressure into this second fight, and perhaps that's where she may have more success. She can square up a bit as well. I think she can, like I say, react to feints. Like I mentioned, I would like to see Galle feint a bit more. She can load up on her punches and just kind of be sat a bit too long, just loading up on them big shots. And if they don't land, then they're going to probably, look quite bad. And I think she can fight emotionally. I think she did get frustrated in that first fight versus Gaia because of how well Gaia was doing defensively, and she can fight emotionally. Gaia is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Gaia will win via unanimous decision. I think it's going to be another comfortable, realistic performance. I think if she boxes similarly to that in the first fight, she can win again. I don't really think too much has to change. I don't really think the game plan has to change too much. Like I say, I'd like to see her feint more. Carreno may bite onto that. I think, perhaps she needs to just keep moving well. I would like to see, like I say, Carreno be a bit more bullish and a bit more of a pressure fighter, but I still think that Gaia's movement can be too much for Carreno, and Gaia can win again via unanimous decision. Then who she could go on to fight? I mean, realistically, I don't necessarily know, like I say, why this fight's happening again. So I'd like to see her career then move on. So she's still early on in her career. She's not had loads of fights, but I would like to see it move on a bit more. So with the bantamweight division, there is some big names available. There is some big fights available. Like I say, Hughes versus Johnson. That rematch is probably going to happen. Metcalf is a recent champion, IBF champion, so perhaps that fight could happen. Maybe Yoshida, who's coming off the loss versus Metcalf, perhaps Bridges if she comes back, Forsland, of course, like I say, the WBC and WBO champion. That could be a fight to be made. Forsland hasn't left her home country yet and might be willing to take on Gaia, who would probably possibly be one of the toughest tests in which Forsland has had to face. I'm not, entirely sure. Just thinking off the top of my head, that could be one of the toughest tests in which Forsland's had to face. And if she's, and like I say, if Gaia is willing to go into her home country, which I'm sure she would be with the lack of a big promoter in which both of them have, that could be a fight to be made, and that would be one that would be very entertained by. Or Juarez is a Argentinian fighter coming through. I believe she has a similar type of record to that of Gaia. She's not a big name or anything like that, but she's a big Argentinian fighter who Gaia could have her come to Canada and fight her. So something like that could happen. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like it if you did need like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.